The subcommittee will come to order. We meet today pursuant to notice to mark up 4 bipartisan measures. As your offices have been notified, it is the intent of the chair to consider en bloc the following items which were previously provided to members and are in your folders. House Resolution 210, affirming and recognizing Khmer Laotian Hmong and Montagnard freedom fighters and the people of Cambodia and Laos for their support and defense of the United States Armed Forces and freedom in Southeast Asia. Included in that is Salmon Amendment 148 in the nature of a substitute to HRES 210. House Resolution 634, recognizing the importance of the United States Republic of Korea-Japan trilateral relationship to counter North Korean threats and nuclear proliferation and to ensure regional security and human rights. Salmon Amendment 146 in the nature of a substitute to HRES 634. House Resolution 728, supporting human rights, democracy, and the rule of law in Cambodia. Sherman Amendment 42 to HRES 728, and HR 4501, the Distribution and Promotion of Rights and Knowledge Act of 2016, without objection. These items are considered as read and will be considered en bloc. And I will now recognize members to speak on these items, beginning with myself and the ranking member. I'd like to speak in support of each of the measures our subcommittee will be marking up today. First, House Resolution 210, legislation introduced by Mr. Duffy of Wisconsin, recognizes the people of Cambodia and Laos for their support of the United States Armed Forces in Southeast Asia. Many ethnic groups in Cambodia and Laos fought with the United States Armed Forces, aided in rescue efforts, assisted with intelligence gathering, and provided food and shelter to our troops during the Vietnam War era. These acts are truly commendable, and this resolution seeks to recognize their important contributions in our shared history. I worked with Mr. Duffy in creating an amendment in the nature of a substitute and submit that today to clarify some of the language in the bill. The next item is House Resolution 634, a bill I introduced to recognize the strategic and security importance of the United States Republic of Korea-Japan trilateral relationship. North Korea continues its provocations, test firing 2 ballistic missiles just a couple of weeks ago. North Korea's bold-faced rejection of international norms and multiple UN resolutions is manifestly threatening the safety of the neighborhood and our close allies, Japan and Republic of Korea. Proving the administration's strategy of strategic patience is not working. As a result, we must work proactively with our allies to counter North Korean threats and nuclear ambitions. The Korean-Japan relationship has come a long way, and our 3 nations are now working closely together to confront the threat of a nuclear North Korea. These closer ties will ultimately foster increased security and ultimately improve the lives of all those on the peninsula and in the region. We can have no other expectation than that North Korea will continue its provocations, and we must stand firm with our allies and partner with them to deploy an anti-missile system that will protect their communities. This resolution puts forth congressional intent to bolster the trilateral relationship and offers support for regional ballistic missile defense systems and provides viable stability to the region. Next, House Resolution 728, introduced by our Foreign Affairs colleague, Mr. Lowenthal, seeks to support human rights, democracy, and the rule of law in Cambodia. I was proud to be the lead co-sponsor with him on this legislation to support democracy and human rights in Cambodia. I'm deeply concerned by the ongoing harassment of opposition politicians and growing restrictions on civil society and the press. The opposition leader remains in exile under the threat of arrest, and his deputy faces ostensibly politically motivated charges as well. There is much that must be done in Cambodia to ensure fair and free elections next year. This legislation will help facilitate the necessary changes. Our last item is HR 4501, the Distribution and Promotion of Rights and Knowledge Act of 2016, which I was pleased to introduce in partnership with Ranking Member Sherman. When looking at the mess that is North Korea, we largely have 2 means to improve security in the region and the lives of those within the Hermit Kingdom. First, under Chairman Royce's leadership, Congress has already imposed new sanctions to squeeze off funding mechanisms in an effort to reduce the means to proliferate nuclear weapons. Second, we need to provide information to the people of North Korea to empower them from the inside to reduce Kim Jong-un's influence and power. North Korean leadership maintains a stranglehold on information and only provides propaganda to preserve its power. In 2008, under the North Korean Human Rights Act, Congress authorized radio information flow into North Korea to educate and free the minds of the people. Technology and times have changed, and the programs we fund are in need of upgrades as well. This bill will improve content and listenership to empower the people of North Korea with information about the outside world and basic human rights by allowing distribution of devices as well as content within North Korea. These much-needed updates to the program will go a long way to undermine the regime's oppressive governance in North Korea. All these bills are solid bipartisan measures, and I urge my colleagues to support them as introduced or corrected by way of amendment in the nature of a substitute. And I'd like to recognize Mr. Sherman for any comments that he might have.
Thank you. I want to thank the chairman for holding this markup. I support each of the 4 bills we're considering. HRES 210, affirming and recognizing the Khmer, Laotian, Hmong, and Montagnard freedom fighters and the people of Cambodia and Laos for their support and defense of the United States Armed Forces and freedom in Southeast Asia. It is entirely appropriate that we recognize these brave allies who fought alongside us. Supporting human rights, democracy, and the rule of law in Cambodia, HRES 728. I want to thank my colleague from Southern California, Mr. Lowenthal, for his leadership on this resolution and his general leadership on human rights in Southeast Asia. I met just last week with opposition leader Sam Ranzi, who's in exile because the government of Hun Sen has abused the criminal defamation law to try to silence him. You can't have a democracy when you have a criminal defamation law, probably of any kind, but certainly a criminal defamation law that is used to silence and criminalize political speech. That's why I offered my amendment that would call specifically on Cambodia to reform its defamation law and hopefully not apply it to any political speech and not provide criminal penalties for so-called defamatory statements. And we want to make it explicit that Congress takes issue or takes these issues extremely seriously. We all buy garments. Some of them are made in Cambodia. Cambodian garment manufacturers and U.S. importers have got to understand that the American people want to see improvements in human rights in Cambodia. HRES 634, recognizing the importance of the United States Republic of Korea Japan trilateral relationship to counter North Korean threats and nuclear proliferation and to ensure regional security and human rights. The North Korean regime of Kim Jong-un is a great danger to international security. The Kim regime continues to work toward developing missiles and nuclear weapons. It is now trying to lengthen the reach of those missiles with the sole purpose of reaching the United States. I'm also concerned about North Korea perhaps selling nuclear weapons to Iran or others. And of course, Iran now has many, many tens of billions of dollars that it did not have at the beginning of last year. The guiding principle of the United States policies in North Korea should be to exert every effort to pressure the regime in order to incentivize change. So this resolution encouraging cooperation with South Korea and Japan makes sense. I fully support the resolution. Moving on to H.R. 4501, Distribution and Promotion of Rights and Knowledge Act of 2016. Pleased to join our chairman in introducing this resolution. It calls for a more assertive U.S. approach in trying to get independent information to the people of North Korea using electronic media of various forms, as well as improving our broadcasting efforts. I want to thank the chairman for moving this important bill. Beyond economic sanctions, short of the use of military force, one of the most effective things we can do is provide the people of North Korea with information which this murderous regime seeks to deny them. This is one of the most effective things the international community can do to pressure the regime and hopefully move forward to a day when we can have a government in North Korea that is at peace with the world and at peace with its own people. Information from independent sources has consistently been a destabilizing influence on totalitarian regimes, which accounts for why they go to such extreme ends to prevent that information from reaching its citizens. The United States should increase its efforts in this regard, increasing current VOA broadcasting into North Korea and supplementing this broadcasting with social media. We must adopt our diplomatic efforts to spread the American message according to the new technology of these times. I'm pleased to see the committee move forward in a bipartisan fashion, which of course has characterized its work. And I yield back 1 second of time.
Thank the ranking member. Chair recognizes Mr. Rohrabacher.
I rise in support of all four of these resolutions, but in particular, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership in HRES 210, which underscores the important role played by Khmer, Laotian, Hmong, and Montagnards during the Vietnam War. Now, while not in the actual military, I found myself in the Central Highlands in Vietnam in 1967, and I was working with the Montagnard tribesmen, who the people who you could trust with your life were Montagnard tribesmen, and at that time there were some troubles with relying on our allies in the South Vietnamese army, but these tribal people, the Montagnards, and by the way, Montagnards mean mountain people, and Hmong and Laotian means mountain people. And what we're really talking about is an ancient separation of various peoples of that region between mountain people and valley people. And the Montagnards were very unsophisticated but most courageous. They were short and small in stature, but just overwhelming in courage and honor with their word. So it's good that we had. It's good that we're honoring them today because they saved a lot of American lives, and I witnessed that firsthand. And number two, I'd like to thank Mr. Lowenthal for his HRES 728. Mr. Lowenthal has, as I did when I represented his district, which he represents now, a large Cambodian population of Cambodian Americans, and the Cambodian Americans have come here to be free, but they look back at their homeland, and after all these years when the Vietnam War is behind us, Cambodia is still run by the same tough guy, corrupt regime that has been in power for over 30 years. Let me just note, in a historical note, of one reason why this is an important resolution for us is that the United States government convinced Hun Sen, the tough guy who was put into power by a Vietnamese military, they convinced him that he should actually have a free and fair election, and he had it. And there were 20,000 United Nations troops that were permitted into Cambodia for that election. This must have been about the middle 1990s. Hun Sen lost that election. He lost the election, and but the American ambassador at the time felt that Hun Sen would not give up power, and if we tried to force it, that there would be bloodshed, etc. And we backed down. and there was a compromise that was reached. They'd have 2 prime ministers and 2 presidents. That bit of lack of willingness to stand up has condemned the people of Cambodia all of these years to live under a tyrannical and corrupt regime. And this resolution should remind us that the people of Cambodia are still suffering, and we should not leave them out of the equation when we are trying to decide where we are going to take a stand, because it was our ambassador that made the wrong decision that has condemned them all of these years. So what this resolution should be called is, Mr. Hun Sen, it's time to go. And as we pass this resolution, I hope that message will be delivered to Hun Sen. It is time for you to go, Hun Sen. It is time for the people of Cambodia to have their freedom and to cast off this corrupt regime that steals their property and enriches a small clique of Hun Sen cronies. So with that said, I will be supporting all of the resolutions, but especially those 2.
Thank the gentleman. Chair recognizes Mr. Lowenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing up my resolution, HRES 728, which supports human rights, democracy, and the rule of law in Cambodia. And I'd also like to thank you, Mr. Chair, for introducing this bill as the first other sponsor, along with myself, along with Chairman Royce as a co-sponsor and Ranking Member Engel as a co-sponsor. Congressman Shabbat is also an original co-sponsor. Together, Congressman Shabbat and myself, we founded the Congressional Cambodia Caucus earlier this year to shine a light on these issues. As been pointed out so well by Congressman Rohrabacher, who I thank you for your comments, and also by the chair, Cambodia is a nation with enormous potential, home to a large youth population that strives to have their voices heard and their concerns listened to. However, for over 30 years, Cambodia has been ruled by the same ruling party and its leader, Prime Minister Hun Sen. Despite political violence and election irregularities, which were sanctioned by Hun Sen and his Cambodia People's Party, the opposition has continued to grow in support and will contest first local elections in 2017 and national elections in 2018. Last year, the Cambodian government revived the 7-year-old defamation charges against opposition leader Sam Rainsy, expelling him from the parliament, forcing him into self-imposed exile. That's not enough. Since then, the government has sought to arrest Kem Sokha, the deputy to Sam Rainsy and the deputy opposition leader, who now remains under effective house arrest. This deteriorating political situation in Cambodia demands action from the United States. That's why it's so important that we pass this resolution and show that Congress stands with the people of Cambodia and reaffirms our commitment to democracy, human rights, and the rule of law in Cambodia. Through this resolution, we call on the government of Cambodia to, 1, cease all harassment and intimidation of the Cambodian opposition. Drop all politically motivated charges against opposition lawmakers. Allow them to return to Cambodia and freely participate in the political process. And we ask the government of Cambodia to foster an environment where democracy can thrive and flourish. Lastly, I'd like to thank Congressman Sherman for working with us to offer his amendment strengthening the resolution. This amendment adds a clause calling for reform of criminal defamation laws of the sort which are now being used to prosecute Cambodian opposition leaders, laws that are fundamentally anti-democratic. Again, I urge my colleagues to support this resolution, and I thank you again, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you. Do any other members seek recognition to speak on any of these items? If not, then we'll go ahead and proceed. Then we will be voting on adopting the items under consideration on block. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the en bloc items are approved. Without objection, HRES 210, HRES 634, HRES 728, and HR 4501, as amended, will be reported favorably to the full committee, and the staff is directed to make any technical and conforming changes. And I'd like to thank all the members and staff for the assistance and cooperation that went into today's markup, and the subcommittee stands adjourned.